In the winter of 1981, on a Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles, the training floor of a private gymnasium on Ventura Boulevard held 41 people. Not one of them understood what they were about to see. The ceiling fans turned slowly above a polished hardwood floor. The smell of rosin and old leather hung in the air. Outside, traffic moved at the pace it always moved. The city had no idea what was happening inside that building. 41 people were about to learn something about perception that would take each of them the rest of their lives to fully explain. Dolph Lundgren was 23 years old that afternoon. He stood 6 feet 5 inches in flat-soled shoes. He weighed 237 pounds, and not one of those pounds was decorative. He held a third-degree black belt in Kyokushin karate, which is not a belt you receive for attendance. Kyokushin does not score on points. It does not reward controlled contact. It is a full-contact discipline that ends when one man cannot continue, and Lundgren had ended a great many men's ability to continue. He had represented Sweden in international competition. He had trained under instructors who did not know the word gentle. His shoulders measured something a tailor would have had to measure twice. The people in that gymnasium that afternoon had watched him work for 20 minutes before any of this began, and they understood that they were looking at a serious man doing a serious thing. His technique was not decorative either. His roundhouse kick had been clocked and measured. The arc of it was clean. His elbows came through with the geometry of a man who had done the same movement so many times that his nervous system had stopped asking permission from his brain. He was not a large man pretending to be dangerous. He was a large man who was dangerous. And the distinction matters. In the next 11 seconds, beginning from the moment Dolph Lundgren stepped forward and said what he said, everything in that gymnasium was going to change. 11 seconds. 3 movements. One decision that a man who had never lost would have to make about the kind of man he wanted to be afterward. Nobody in that gymnasium that Tuesday afternoon knew they were about to witness something they would still be describing 40 years later. Chuck Norris had arrived 30 minutes before Lundgren. He had come through the side entrance, which was not a statement of anything except that the side entrance was closer to where he had parked. He wore a gray zip-up sweatshirt and dark trousers and a cap that said nothing on the front. He had street shoes on, not training shoes. He had not come to train. He had come because the owner of the gymnasium, a man named Gerald Peek, who had trained under John Blooming in Amsterdam in 1963, had asked him to come and watch a young Swede work. Norris was 39. He sat in a folding chair against the east wall, one leg crossed over the other, and he watched Lundgren move. He did not stretch while he watched. He did not roll his neck. He did not do what men who want to be noticed do when they watch someone else perform. He sat in the chair, and he watched, and he was as still as a piece of furniture. He had been a professional fighter. He had been world middleweight karate champion for 6 consecutive years, from 1968 to 1974, a record that still existed in 1981 and would continue to exist afterward. He had fought men in every country that held tournaments. He had walked onto floors in Japan and Korea and the Netherlands, and he had walked back off them, and the other man had not always walked. He had started teaching after the competitive years, and his students included people whose names appeared on marquees. He was not famous in the way Lundgren would one day become famous. He was famous in a more specific way, which is the way a thing that works is famous among the people who need things that work. He watched Lundgren move, and his expression did not change. It was Gerald Peek who made the introduction, midway through the afternoon session. He brought Lundgren across the floor and said the name, and Lundgren looked at Norris in the folding chair, and something moved through Lundgren's face. A calculation of some kind. Quiet and quick. He was from a country where men did not perform their confidence loudly. But confidence has a physical grammar even when it is silent, and Lundgren's grammar at that moment said something specific. He said that he had seen some of the competition footage. He said this the way a man says something when he means something slightly different. He said that he had always wondered whether the competition era's stars would hold up in a full contact environment. He said this in a way that was technically a question, and was not a question. Norris looked at him. He did not answer immediately. He let the words settle on the floor between them. Then Lundgren said it plainly. He said Chuck Norris could not last one round with him. He said it in front of 39 people, at a volume that those 39 people could all hear. He said it with the specific courtesy of a man who believes absolutely what he is saying. 3 people in the gymnasium took a step backward without knowing they were doing it. Gerald Peake set both hands flat on the table beside him. A man named Roy Winslow, who had been a stunt coordinator for 11 years, and who had seen a great many things on floors like this one, stopped moving completely. If you are still with this story, and you want to know what happened next, make sure you are subscribed to this channel, and leave a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. This story is not finished, it is only beginning. Norris stood up from the folding chair. He did not stand quickly. There was nothing in the way he stood that acknowledged urgency. He reached up and removed his cap. He folded it once, along the same crease it already held, and he set it on the seat of the folding chair behind him. He unzipped the gray sweatshirt. He folded it in half and set it on top of the cap. He was wearing a white t-shirt beneath the sweatshirt. He did not remove the street shoes. The room had changed temperature. Not the physical temperature. Something else. The 41 people in the gymnasium had stopped doing what they had been doing, and they were watching the east wall. And the recognition was spreading through them, the way a wave moves across a surface when something is dropped into it. Some of them had known who was sitting in the chair all afternoon. Some of them were understanding it only now. A young man in the third row of observers pressed both palms together and held them in front of his mouth, and did not separate them again for several minutes. Norris walked to the center of the floor. He had already lost. The man from Sweden. He simply did not know it yet. They stood facing each other on the hardwood floor, and the only sounds in the gymnasium were the ceiling fans and the traffic from Ventura Boulevard coming through the gap beneath the double doors. Norris stood at 8 feet. This is the first thing to understand about what happened next. He stood at 8 feet, which is a specific distance. And it is specific because a man of Lundgren's reach at 6 feet 5 inches has a theoretical striking range that ends at approximately 6.5 feet. Norris stood at 8 feet, and this was not an accident. A confrontation between 2 trained men is not 2 men striking each other. It is a conversation about distance. The man who controls the space between the 2 bodies controls the outcome of the conversation. Everything else, the technique, the power, the credential, is a subordinate variable. Distance is the primary one. Lundgren moved at second one. He closed the distance with a lead leg round kick aimed at the midsection, a technique his body had performed a number 1,000 times. The same kick Gerald Peake had watched him land cleanly on 4 separate opponents in the preceding 20 minutes. It was not a slow kick. It was a fast kick thrown by a very large man who knew how to throw it. Norris was not there when it arrived. He had moved laterally, to his left, at a distance of 14 inches. The kick passed through air. Lundgren's return foot found the floor, and he reset, and he read the angle, and he understood something, and the thing he understood changed his face. At second 3, he threw a right straight that had been the last thing several men remembered before waking on floors different from the one on which they had lost consciousness. Norris was not there for that either. He had moved backward, precisely 6 inches, and the fist passed at a distance Gerald Peake later estimated at the width of a hand. Roy Winslow, who had stopped moving at the table, said afterward that he had watched the sleeve of Norris's white t-shirt move from the displaced air of the punch. Winslow said he had decided at that moment that he needed to sit down, and he sat down. 3 people later confirmed that a coffee cup on the table to the north side of the room was set down during second 3 by a woman named Diane Kessler, who was a journalist and who had been invited to write something about Lundgren for a Swedish sports publication, and who set the cup down with a careful, deliberate movement as though she did not want to make any noise. Lundgren had thrown his 2 best things. The round kick from the lead leg and the right straight that followed it were the sequence. They were the sentence. He had written that sentence many times before, and the paragraph that came after it had always been the same paragraph. The paragraph where the other man was on the floor. He had written the sentence into empty air. At second 5, he changed approach. He closed, meaning he chose to eliminate the distance entirely and move into the clinch, which is the correct adjustment when an opponent is defeating you with footwork. It was a sound decision. It was the decision a trained man makes. Norris led him close to 4 feet, and then his left hand moved. Gerald Peake said later that he did not see the hand move. He said he was watching, and he did not see the hand move. He saw Lundgren at 4 feet, and then he saw Lundgren at a different angle, and those were the 2 things he saw. Roy Winslow said the same thing from his seated position. Diane Kessler, who was a journalist and who wrote things down for her living, wrote nothing during seconds 5 through 8. She confirmed this afterward. Her pen was not moving. The technique was a palm heel strike, controlled to the center of Lundgren's chest. It was not thrown at a percentage that would have damaged him. It was thrown at a percentage that was precisely sufficient to take the weight off his back foot. The biomechanics of a man who loses the weight off his back foot in a forward posture are not complicated. There is a direction that the body goes. Dolph Lundgren went backward, and then down, and then flat. He was on the hardwood floor of the gymnasium on Ventura Boulevard on a Tuesday afternoon in 1981, and the ceiling fans turned above him, and the traffic continued on the boulevard outside, and the light came through the gymnasium's high windows and fell flat on the floor around him with the complete indifference of light. He lay there for 3 seconds. Norris stood above him and his breathing was unchanged. He extended his right hand downward, not slowly, not quickly. He extended it at the pace of a man who has decided that what comes next matters more than what just happened. Lundgren looked at the hand. He looked at it for what Roy Winslow would later count as 5 full seconds. A man looking at an extended hand for 5 seconds is looking at more than a hand. He is standing at a fork in a road that has no unmarked option. There is no road that does not require a choice. The hand was extended, and the gymnasium was silent, and Lundgren was on the floor, and the choice was in front of him. He took the hand. Norris pulled him upright with the unceremonious efficiency of a man helping someone off a floor, which is what he was doing. When Lundgren was standing, Norris leaned forward and said something. He said it quietly enough that the nearest observer, Gerald Peake, caught 2 words of it and was not certain about those 2 words. He said it at a volume that was intended for one person, which is the only volume at which certain things should be said. Lundgren nodded once, Norris picked up his gray sweatshirt from the folding chair and put it back on and zipped it. He picked up his cap and put it back on his head. He walked to the side exit through which he had arrived. He did not look back. He did not say anything to the room. A man named Thomas Erickson, who had been one of Lundgren's training partners for 2 years and who had come to Los Angeles specifically to watch him work, walked to the center of the floor where Lundgren was standing. Erickson put one hand on Lundgren's shoulder and left it there. He did not say anything. Lundgren did not look at him. Gerald Peake said later that Lundgren stood in the center of the floor for approximately 4 minutes after Norris left. He said that Lundgren was very still during those 4 minutes, in the way that a man who is revising something is still, going back through the pages of something looking for where the error entered. The story left that gymnasium in the way that stories leave rooms where things happen. It moved through the people who had been present, and then through the people who knew the people who had been present. It moved through gyms and training halls, and through the informal networks by which serious practitioners of serious disciplines share information. It moved through decades. It lost a detail here and gained a detail there, in the way that oral history always moves, because memory is not a recording, but a reconstruction, and reconstruction is collaborative and never perfectly accurate. Roy Winslow told the story to a stunt crew on a film set in Burbank in 1984, and the crew told it forward. Diane Kessler included 3 sentences of it in an article that was about something else entirely. And those 3 sentences were the sentences that people remembered from the article. Gerald Peake told it to his students when he thought it was relevant, which was more often than his students expected. Nobody heard it from Norris. He did not tell it. This is consistent. Lundgren went on. He went on to a career that included things that required exactly the combination of discipline and controlled force that he had been refining the day he walked across a gymnasium floor in Los Angeles. He became, by any external measure, a man who had achieved what he set out to achieve. The afternoon on Ventura Boulevard was one afternoon in a long life that contained many afternoons. But Thomas Erickson said, 31 years after it happened, that he had asked Lundgren once what Norris had said to him before he left. Erickson said Lundgren had been quiet for a moment, and then said that the words were not his to repeat. He said Lundgren had described them as the most useful sentence anyone had spoken to him before the age of 25. He said that was all Lundgren would give him. That is enough. Some things do not require full disclosure to be true. What happened in that gymnasium on a Tuesday in 1981 was not about a man being put on a floor. Men are put on floors. It happens in gymnasiums every day of the week, in every city that has gymnasiums, and nobody tells the story afterward. What happened was about the 8 feet. It was about the man in the folding chair who arrived through the side entrance and sat still and watched, and did not perform his confidence, and was not impressed, and was not afraid, and had nothing to prove, and therefore had everything available. The story a man tells about another man before he has been in the room with him is always a story about himself. What he expects is a mirror. What he finds when the mirror is not there is information. Dolph Lundgren found information. He took it with both hands, which is the correct way to receive anything valuable. On this channel, we find the moments that did not make the official record. The afternoon in the gymnasium before the career, the sentence spoken at a volume of 1, the hand extended after everything had been decided. We find the men before the legend settled around them, and we find what the legend is made of. Next time, we go to a film set in 1985, where a stunt coordinator with 15 years of experience told Bruce Lee's closest student that Lee's system was theater, not technique, and what the student said and then demonstrated before the afternoon was over.